Well, I missed last week, but let me continue my attempt to fill in my Spanish gaps, looking at Matthew chapter 1. So we're now to the birth story, um, and so it begins with verse 18. And I'm doing what I believe is the Spanish version of the Living Translation. So Mateo 1 del 18 al 19. So verso 18. Este es el relato de cómo nació Jesús el Mesías. This is the narrative of how Jesus the Messiah was born. So we saw nació in a previous verse from a different version, in which it basically means was born. It is the preterite or past tense. So this is the narrative, the relation of how Jesus the Messiah was born. So estaba comprometido para casarse con José. His mother, Mary, was engaged. She was promised to be married with Joseph, José. Pero antes de que la boda se realizara, I'm sure I massacred that. Please help me if you speak Spanish and want to help me. Antes de que, I always have trouble saying that sort of thing. Antes de que la boda se realizara, mientras todavía era virgen, quedó embarazada mediante el poder del Espíritu Santo. Okay, so his mother Mary was promised, was engaged to be married with Joseph, but before the marriage was realized, while still she was a virgin, she became pregnant by the power of the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to analyze some of these words. I spent a little time to analyze the words on the next slide. 19. José, su prometido, era un hombre bueno y no quiso avergonzarla en público. Por lo tanto, decidió romper el compromiso en privado. Okay, so José, her promised, he was a good man, and he did not want to embarrass her in public. Thus, he decided to break the agreement in private. Okay, so let's look at some of the grammar things here, and I'll try to seal them on my brain. So I've been learning the preterite tense. The preterite tense is the simple past tense that says it happened. So he was born. Nació. It's a third person singular, that O with the accent. We saw it here. She took pregnant. Quedó. Again, third person singular, that O with an accent on it. Estaba. So estaba is the imperfect of estar. There are two verbs, at least two verbs to be, two main verbs to be in Spanish. One is to be in a kind of temporary situation. I was sitting on the couch, although that's not. I was hot. There you are. It's temporary because I might be cold tomorrow. As opposed, so that's estar. Ser is like I was married. That's more of a permanent condition rather than something that's, or I was a teacher. There you are. Ser. So estar is more temporary or situational or contextual. Ser is more being in a more ontological sense. So ba, I know this from Latin, is an imperfect, different from the preterite. The preterite is kind of a simple past. He was born. But estaba with the ba implies more of a continuous past. So she was engaged. So this is not something that happened one day, but it was a passing phase. She was engaged in order to be married with Joseph. Para kasarse. Para often indicates purpose. Kasar is, I think, married, and then say is reflexive. When you add say into the mix, notice that some of these are reflexive here. It can make it passive. So to be married with Joseph, the to be is the passive bit that comes from the say. Some verbs are just reflexive. It's a thing they do. To be married, pero antes de que, before, it's a lot of words to say. In this particular instance, English is easier. Before, antes de que, la boda se realizara. Okay, so this I had to look this up. So if this was a lot of times you make the future tense by adding an ending to the infinitive. So realizar is the infinitive, to realize. Realizará with an accent would be future. It will realize. But I looked it up, and I'm pretty sure that in this construction, this is a imperfect subjunctive. Which, if you don't know much about grammar, I'm sorry. I have a head start because I've taught a lot of languages, and so I can kind of add Spanish onto a map I already have. But the imperfect, this is the imperfect, is a past tense usually. The subjunctive deals with things that are probable or might happen. And so I suspect the reason why this is subjunctive is because it's in this kind of before clause, before the marriage would be realized, before it was realized. Um, anyway, so it's imperfect third person singular, and it's also reflexive, and it's subjunctive, probably because of the clause that it's in. Before the marriage was realized. And the was comes from the say, the fact that it's reflexive. Before the marriage was realized, mientras todavía era virgen, while still todavía, again, English is shorter, was. Now this, so if estaba is the imperfect of estar, era is the imperfect of ser, I'm pretty sure. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong. So she was a virgin. This is a state. This is not I'm hot. This is I'm a virgin. Anyway, um, so uh, while still she was a virgin. So this is the same English translation. Both of these are imperfect, I think. Although this might actually be the preterite of ser. But anyway, it's past tense. She became pregnant. Quedó embarazada. So quedó is the preterite of quedo. Yay! So that's not too hard, which means to stay. So queda, he stays. That's a vocabulary that I haven't had firmly in my mind, nor have I had querer. Yes, I have. Quiero Taco Bell. Quiso is the imperfect um, quiero. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Jose, her promised, her betrothed, was a good man. He did not want. Quiso. So quiso is the preterite of querer, to want. So that's something to know. He did not want. No quiso. No quiso queso. I didn't want cheese. Okay. Avergonzarla. So la is her. This is something Spanish does. Notice casarse, where the infinitive to marry her, it's put together as one word. So la is her also. Avergonzarla, to embarrass her. And la, this is something that Spanish does. It sometimes will put these little words onto these little pronouns onto the infinitive. He did not want to embarrass her in public, Thus, por lo tanto, again, it's much easier in English to say thus. It goes the other way sometimes, but in these cases, English would be easier than por lo tanto. Thus, he decided to sever the agreement in private. Compromiso seems to mean agreement, the betrothal. Um, I might call this a false friend because it looks like compromise, but it doesn't mean compromise. It actually means something that's an agreement that's very firm. And so the English word compromise, although actually compromise is not a bad thing in most cases. You can't have a good marriage without compromise. But compromise has become a bad word in some circles. The agreement it's misleading a little bit because agreement is stronger than compromise, I think. Okay, so this is the narrative of how Jesus the Messiah was born. His mother Mary was engaged to be married to Joseph, but before the marriage was realized, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant by the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her promised, was a good man, and he did not want to embarrass her in public. Thus, he decided to sever the arrangement in private. Este es el relato de cómo nació Jesús el Mesías. Su madre María estaba comprometida para casarse con José, pero antes de que la boda se realizara, mientras todavía era virgen, quedó embarazada mediante el poder del Espíritu Santo. José, su prometido, era un hombre bueno y no quiso avergonzarla en público. Por lo tanto, decidió romper el compromiso en privado. Anyway, I think I'm learning some things. So I'll review that, and next week we will move on, Lord willing.